Sorry.
Yeah.
Mr. Dubauer, did you have something that you wanted to?
Yes, I'd like to suggest that, let's start with some,
10-7.
rather than all-encompassing motions, first thing I want to question is there any supervisor here that doesn't believe that we need more camera coverage at the park to be able to actually log and record what's going on?
I don't think so, not yet.
We don't need cameras.
No, I don't.
I'm not opposed to cameras. I just don't. There's different types of monitoring, and I'm fine with looking at that and including that in my motion if.
I'm trying to avoid all these multiplicities and personal things.
Well, there's nothing
which is-
personal.
yeah,
It's
well,
part
yeah,
of it.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
That's due
when
diligence.
you draft something like this and then you talk.
That's
it
called
is.
due diligence. As a
Yeah.
board member, we're supposed to look at the meeting book and come prepared.
I got news for you. Nobody reads this book any closer than I do. Wait till we get to the budget and you'll see. So having said that, I think that the cameras document and log things that aren't conjecture, they're fact. They talk about time, they record dates, and they're also data that can be used by the sheriff's office. That would seem to be a very basic thing that we need to do. We can't have staff monitoring that place 24/7. And to clarify, by the way, it is not a private park, it is public. Public. We haven't even determined, here we've got signage that's up that says dusk till dawn, yet we're talking about letting people use it at night, which is fine. But we better change the signs if we can't conclude what the hours of operation are permitted.
Are you finished?
I'm done.
Yes.
I agree that that would be a good first step and monitoring what's going on. And we could give that to the sheriff's department if there's illegal activity. So that would be something that we could do as a district.
Mr. Banks, do you have one report?
I do. I didn't include the cameras, but I would be willing to include that if the majority of the board feels like that is something that we want to include in the motion.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I think this is a long-term, there needs to be a long-term solution here. But I want to make sure that we address at least some of the critical items today in a motion. So I'd like to make a motion that we update the signage at the park, we add additional lighting to illuminate dark areas, we add surveillance cameras, and that we secure Lee County Sheriff's Department for private detail for 3 months. And then after that 3 months, we review the traffic activity feedback from the residents and be able to come back and offer a long-term solution.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any other conversation?
Yeah, I'll agree, but no, the detail is not the thing to suddenly embark on. The phone calls, the pressure, the taxes that we already pay to bring in additional costs. No. No. That gentleman right there, I am absolutely positive, if he hasn't already, is going to be having a meeting with another gentleman, and he's going to tell them about all of the noise that he's heard here today.
Are you finished?
Yeah.
I do agree with that. I think that I would like to have more participation with the residents, that they would start to contact the sheriff's department more often, because he did say that he doesn't really get any calls over here. So that would be something that the residents could do to help us in seeing what's going on at the park. So I do agree with everything Doug said, but I don't think we need to pay the sheriff's department for 3 months for them to monitor the situation.
He's asking for 2 nights to help act as a deterrent. I think it's a small price to pay to try to clean up.
But don't you think the residents should call? I mean,
Well,
if they're not
they
calling,
They still can, because we're we're only saying, at least, I think, 2 nights a week. There's 7 nights in a week. If the activity is on those other nights, then it is dependent on the residents to call the sheriff's department. And I agree, they should be doing that. But we've got issues that we wanna clean up. And I think to try it for 3 months and see how it goes, it's not a huge investment, but it could pay off in a big way.
Okay, members of the board, I have a motion and I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-1.
Can I get clarification?
Certainly.
So if I understand, we want to add some additional signage, and we want to evaluate and bring back to the board a lighting plan. The lighting, we are looking for not necessarily lighting the park amenities, but more of a security.
Yeah, very similar to what we have. Just, I think, towards the playground by the tree areas, it's very dark. And we could probably get some recommendations from the residents that live around there, or, just do some due diligence.
Yep.
Just
We're-
additional
we're gonna-
lighting.
We're gonna rely on you for the details
Yep.
and bring them back to us.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Don't forget the cameras.
Okay, so as I'm going to need to approach vendors, and so I need to make sure that I understand the scope of what it is that we're requesting them.
It's
to
security
provide.
lighting, not.
Okay. Also, as far as surveillance cameras, if I understand correctly, we want the type of technology, we want to be able to try to see what's going on and actually be able to download a video in order for me to be able to transfer that to the sheriff's department, because our current technology, we do not have that. So the technology is going to have to change in order to accomplish those goals. And also, am I understanding that we want a surveillance camera system, but you're not expecting staff to monitor it? We would only be referring back to the video footage on demand? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And we
Mr.
might
Chairman-
want-
Mr. Chairman, if I may, on that point with regards to, I would suggest, and it's allowed under Florida statutes, that when that packet is put together for the board's consideration, that's exempt and confidential as being part of it, that could reveal a security system plan or portion thereof. And the board has the ability to have that portion of the board meeting, when they evaluate the security plan and implementation of the cameras, to be basically confidential, exempt, and closed, so that the board has that ability and option down the road,
Okay.
just to, as a heads up to everybody.
And I just wasn't that familiar with all the different types of options, so I think, April, your recommendation on, maybe what is the best to use in those situations by maybe the sheriff's department or other security, agencies, what they recommend.
Okay.
I can't give any more guidance than that.
Okay, and then the last provision that you voted on was a 3-month security detail. Now, are we wanting to collect data? Is there anything specific that we're wanting to collect? Or do you want the Lee County Sheriff's Office detail that specifically, or am I to look at private security companies as
I
well?
think we agreed on Lee County Sheriff.
Okay,
Yeah,
Okay.
and I had, originally I'd put Friday, Saturday, 9 to 1, that's their shift, 4-hour shifts, is that what? But I don't have a lot of experience with what our previous Lee County detail is, so, I would.
It was random.
Okay,
Instead of
yeah,
manager.
yeah.
Is that enough for now? April,
think
is
so.
that enough
Okay.
for now?
mm-hmm, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, your board has made some decisions. They were difficult, they were lengthy. They wouldn't have been made without your continued interest in this item. And please don't think that we're gonna be losing interest in this, as I suspect you are not, and we'll look forward to seeing you here again. Thank you. Mr. Manager, do you still have?
Yes, sir.
Tinkle?
Mr.
wanting to
Tinkle.
talk to us?
Mine's got a mundane after that. Ed Tinkle, Bent Pine Drive. 3 things. One, update on the pond specs and the pre-qualifications. We finished the detailed specifications. They've been typed and being reviewed by staff, and we prepared a notice to bidders or potential bidders of a pre-qualification statement. So I think what I need to do is to get a better idea from you all of what the timeline is that this stuff has to go, because we know we've got a contract expiring, what, the end of September? So I don't know what has been your typical turnaround. Tony, how long is it going to take you to review these documents, that type of stuff?
Not that long for the pre-qualification, I think we already.
Well, with the brief qualifications, in my opinion, you're going to have to give them out the general conditions, the detailed specifications, and all that to verify that they have the ability to do the work. Because that's one of the things that we're looking for. We've kind of modified it after what Tetra Tech and I guess the board staff did on the Pond Restoration Bank pre-qualification system. And it's a pretty lengthy form that's got to be filled out by these guys, these vendors, to show that they have the ability to do this. And I think with the work that we're talking about on pond maintenance, now that we have the pond maintenance standards and littorals, we graduated from the 8th grade into high school real quick on the extent of work that's going to be done by these people. And I'm not so sure that we have a whole bunch of people that can be pre-qualified to do it. It's going to be interesting. But anyway, we need to know is what's the drop dead date you need to have from us, what we believe to be our final documents. Because I still want to take it before our pond committee.
Well, I guess the question is, how soon does everyone want these documents to go out? That's the question. I mean, I don't know what the timeline is. I've not seen.
What's the turnaround on pre-qualification?
I have to.
30 days?
I can look at the rule. I have to look at it. But I guess the question is, when do you want to begin the process of having people make their submittals? As soon as possible?
I was kind of looking at that you guys would want to have at least by the August 1st, have pre-qualification statements out such that if you do have 30 days, it gives you 30 days to get those back and then 30 more days to get the bids.
Well, I think we've already advertised for people to submit for pre-qualification. Didn't that notice go
That
out?
was for lake bank restoration,
Bank,
not
okay.
pond maintenance.
Okay, we haven't sent that out yet, so I think we need to generate that document and place the ad in. I forgot how much time we gave the lake maintenance folks to submit.
Right, and we can work with that and come up with a schedule. Were we going through pre-qualification for the maintenance companies?
It's what the board elected at the last meeting, as I recall. You said you wanted to do that. You weren't here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I believe that the vote was you guys wanted to do pre-qualifications, didn't you? Well, I'm positive it
Yeah.
was.
That's my recollection of it.
Yeah. yeah. If we cut that back to where it's only maybe a 2-week or a 3-week pre-qualification turnaround time, that gives us a little bit more time. But if we go 30 days and then go 30 days for opening bids, that contract's going to be expired and not have any time at all to analyze bids or anything else.
Hey,
So, I
Ed,
mean,
is
we're
it-
getting down to crunch time.
Is it viable to include the pre-qualification in the, I wonder if we can bundle it, where here's the pre-qualification step, in order to get to the bid?
We talked about that. There's a problem. There's a potential problem. The problem is that you put the pre-qualification out along with the bid, you're gonna get somebody that comes in, gives you a price that is very attractive, and a layman might say, well, why aren't you going with them? They're 150,000 lower. Then you find out they don't have the staff nor the machinery to do the work.
But no-
So,
well,
I'm
well,
pre-
wouldn't you be able to strike them as not passing the pre-qual step? I mean, even if they
I
got a low
suppose
bid and they
what-
say they can do it.
Then what you would do is have two packets. You'd open one packet to pre-qualify everybody, and then you go to the second packet of the ones that pre-qualified and open their bids,
Well-
and the other one doesn't get opened.
But the ultimate determination as to whether somebody is pre-qualified is up to the board, I believe. I mean, because it's a,
Well, that's how you did it the last time.
Right.
What I'm saying is that the way you could do that on this is go to 2 packets, put it both at the same time, out for bid.
listen,
You analyze the pre-qualifications first, and then after you've pre-qualified, you picked. If you get 5 and you use pre-qualify 4, you only open those 4 packets.
Yeah, or-
The other one you don't
I'd
open.
have to think about whether that works or not. I mean,
I mean,
We've
whether
done
it's
that-
whether
I've
it's
done that
packets or
before,
not,
but-
it would be, you know, your
Ah.
Exhibit A and Exhibit B, you have to go through Exhibit A, complete that before you complete Exhibit.
Tell me how you want to go, but
yeah, I'll
we need
think
to.
about that, 'cause I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, bundle
Okay.
like that.
When you did the meters, that's exactly how you did the meters.
It was a design, I thought it was more of a design build contract.
Well, it's construction, yeah, a little bit different, a little bit
I'll
different.
look at that.
Okay.
Whatever can be the most expeditious, I'll look at, yeah.
The second item, you didn't have it on the agenda, but you discussed it at the last meeting, and since then, I've done a little homework on my own. And in fact, when we were doing the tour of the 6 roads, the issue came up. We're talking about the possibility of expanding this building and looking at, I thought it was about an $835,000 budget. I'd really like to take and have the board seriously consider purchasing and/or leasing, but probably purchasing that Girl Scout building and having that become the main office, and then have this become the utility office. And that might answer some of your questions on that park. Now you've got your office right there at that fun park. You could also then entertain looking at some of the things that I've heard that residents want, not from a kid standpoint, but from an adult standpoint, of adding some pickleball and bocce ball courts back there. In other words, have that as our center of operation. They have a setup to where you can have your public meetings, the whole 9 yards. But at $425,000 purchase price, which I am sure would come down if you do some negotiating, and then spend another $150,000 fixing it up to modify it how you want it. That's a hell of a lot less than $835,000 to do this building. So something to think about. The last one, I will just mention what I've got. I've got some documents that I presented to April and to Tony regarding easements, and I think you're going to have a discussion on it, but I brought some documents relative to at least my review in detail of Gateway Greens, and there's some real significant issues, legal issues, of how we enter into these properties of these 13 ponds coming up for the lake bank restoration. As it yes, sir. Drainage easements is how we enter into those ponds physically, get the materials back to the ponds.
And the staging.
Correct. All of that. But mostly ingress, egress to get it from the road where the materials are going to be brought to the LME where the materials are going to be placed. You got to get from A to B, and it's usually about 120 feet from the road to the back, and we don't have a lot of access points. We have easements, and in particular in Gateway Greens, we not only have easements, but we have requirements that property owners had to adopt certain landscaping that was enforced by, at that time, Westinghouse Communities, that absolutely ignored the existence of easements. So it gets tricky. And so I'm ready to, if Tony's going to have a discussion about that, I've got some documents to give to him of at least what the problem is in Gateway Greens. And since our design review manual in Gateway Greens also was inclusive of, at that time, Pinecrest, Pinewood Lakes, and one more, Devonshire. I have a feeling that those other communities are exactly the same as ours, that we're going to have problems on some of this ingress egress as it relates to, let's say, forcing a property owner to tear out all of his landscaping that could be 20 years old, 25 years old, and put it back at his expense. You thought this meeting was hot. That one would be a real hot meeting.
Are you finished?
I am finished, sir.
Thank
The light didn't even go off. Thank you.
First committee report is Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee. Phil, would you help us, please?
Phil Measy, 9296 Trieste Drive, representing the Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee. You already had in your board packets a written report. What I'd like to focus on are 3 items for which we need your approval. The first is our fund investments. Stephen Bloom has given us an investment model, and we would like to have your approval of doing that. We believe it's conservative. We're comfortable with it, that we will have funds available and still be making as much use of our funds as we possibly can. Also included in that, and Steve and I just discussed it, we'd like to be able to have the ability to roll over some of the CDs that are coming due now. So we would like your approval of both the fund investment plan as well as the ability to roll over CDs as necessary. As I said, the PPAC is very comfortable that this is a conservative estimate and that we'll have plenty of funds available if we follow this. And this takes us well into next year.
May I have a motion to approve the items that Phil Macy has recommended for the Pelican Reserve Advisory Committee?
So moved.
May I have a second? Now, I do have a second. Mr. Newbauer, second. Any questions or discussions for Phil before we vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. The second item, the Safety and Security Work Group proposed to PPAC, and PPAC has endorsed it. We want to put lights on the top of the gates at our entrance and exit at the main gate of Pelican Preserve. They would be similar if you want to see something like them. Colonial has such lights. We think they would be beneficial. We have people who run into the gates. It won't completely stop that, but you know, you were dealing a lot of us oldsters have trouble seeing the gates, at night. And by putting these lights on them, we think they would make the gates a lot more visible, and that it would be beneficial.
Hey, Phil, is it, Hampton Greens has the same type of lights, right? Where they're lit up
Yes.
LED,
They're-
red on one, okay.
Yes,
Okay,
they're
great.
they're
Thank
lit
you.
up LED, and what we would be doing is putting red lights on all the gates, and at our trap gate, red and green, so people could see when they could
When it's
go,
up or it's
when
down,
they
okay.
could stop and when they could go.
Thanks.
This is $1,800, not in our budget. That's the reason we're coming to you, but we have money available that we will not be spending this year to cover that $1,800 expense.
Okay.
May I have a motion for approval of this recommendation? Yep. Mr. Newbauer is making a motion, may I have a second?
Second?
And I have a second. Ms. Gill? Thompson? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you for that. The third item is our post orders. I think we put these in your packet. You probably didn't want to read through all of them. But what these do, as we tried to explain, these kind of are the guidelines for the guards at the gate. They were prepared by Securitas, our security vendor. Very frankly, I think they're not terribly well written, but they do the job. There's a lot of information in there.
Yeah.
And the guards, if they had to consult this every time something happened, they'd have a hell of a time. But what we're going to be doing, and we'll probably bring that back to you, is we're going to be preparing a matrix that goes to the gate that has kind of simple instructions as to how they should handle some of these things that will be a lot easier to use.
Yeah.
I should mention that Tony has reviewed these post orders and is comfortable with them, as is the PPAC. So I would like your approval.
May I have a motion for approval?
Gary has a question?
Did you notice one thing?
What?
Due diligence. It doesn't talk about the guards telling people that enter the gate to monitor the speed limits. I read this whole
Okay.
golly long time.
You gonna make
That-
a motion for approval?
The-
Yes, I will.
Just
With that revision.
I think a second by Pam. Is that-
Yes.
Sam,
I'll
Sam,
second.
you second.
The only comment I have is I just note, because it must have been reformatted in the final
Yeah.
version, the notations to referencing page 28 for the CDD access need to be made to page 30. It just
Okay.
changed the
Thank you.
pages. That appears just a couple of times otherwise.
Okay.
And it was, I enjoyed working with Ron DePonte from the PPAC, and also Mr. French and Sarah Mabry on these. It was a
On
good
these
working
things,
group.
yeah. Gary, that order to give the speed limits has been given to the gate, but it may not be included in here. That's a good point.
And I have a question that isn't related to this, but it is related to the security contract, since there was concerns over whether the Stony Brook guards were given background checks on an annual basis. I wondered if that is true with the Securitas at Pelican.
I must admit, Margaret, I can't answer that question off the top of my head. I think they're doing it, but I'm not sure. Excuse me.
Well, what we might want to do, it's an excellent point, is
Yep.
in the upcoming operations and maintenance agreement that we're working on revising and updating it for Pelican Preserve, that requirement be in that base agreement, that as to any access control vendor, those same kind of background checks need to be performed by the security control, access control vendor that the HOA hires. Excellent point.
Good point. I will check that out.
Thank you.
Bill,
And I will put that in there and send it around.
Cool.
Nice, Gary.
Good point.
Margaret is making reference to a discussion we had several meetings ago about the fact that the assailant in the Orlando shooting was a
Security guard, yeah.
So we are very cautious in
Mhm.
to watch over us.
Okay.
Will
We'll,
you please take that?
we certainly will take
Ladies
that
and gentlemen, I
advice.
have a motion and a second to approve this. May I have a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. 5-0, Mr. Manager. Phil, before you leave.
Yeah.
On page 7.
Yes.
Well, it's on page 7 of my book. It's talking about safety and security work group, that you met with the transportation engineer on signage, and some of the things are deep improvement, then you met with the former chief, da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
Can you give us a little more detail, put a little meat on the bones about that?
Yeah, we, as the Safety and Security Work Group, we have been looking at everything we can do to try and enhance the safety and security in the community. And safety, we believe that part of the study we need to do is how the signage is going in the community. So that was one of the first things we looked at. And this is both for old Pelican Preserve, the non-Cypress Grove area. We have some signage issues there, particular things that we wanted looked at, where we think we probably have to make some changes in the signs. The most obvious one is on Pelican Preserve Boulevard, where it goes down from 4 lanes to 2 over a bridge. It looks like a very dangerous place. There isn't good signage because the speed limit drops from 30 to 15 and the road goes from 4 to 2 lanes. That's the kind of place where we think the signage is not good. So we want to upgrade the signage, and that's the reason we had Carl Caracas, who is a transportation engineer kind of guy, our traffic engineer, take a look at that kind of thing. We are still waiting to hear back from him. We also want to hear from him because we are concerned that the signage, as is currently laid out in Cypress Grove, where we're talking about conveyance in a not too distant future, there are places where there are weaknesses in the signage on Cypress Grove. For example, there's only one speed limit sign on the entirety of Cypress Grove. And there are other things that we feel need to be done, and we want his recommendations with that. To go further, we are, as I believe is mentioned in the report, we are looking at the possibility of signing a traffic control agreement with the city of Fort Myers. And as part of that agreement, their engineering department would again look at the signage to make sure that it is up to the standards that they need in order to enforce speed limits within the community. We need to get back to you because we haven't quite gotten there with that recommendation, and we will get to you as to why we think that ought to be done and what the benefits will be to the community. Bill, did you want more?
Did you talk to Carl about the bicycle painting on the?
No,
golf cart lane?
we have not, and that's another issue. That's a completely separate issue. That is not part of the traffic control agreement. That's not part of the signage that we're doing now. That's another issue that we plan to get back to you on as to what we should be doing. I believe I told April, she had a request to me as to what should be done about the bicycle chevrons in the traffic lane. My suggestion is that we don't do anything about them at this point, because we will be coming back to you with suggestions in that regard. And it seems to me that it's probably not prudent to spend a lot of money to remove those chevrons, and then possibly we might be putting them back in. So my suggestion and the committee's suggestion would be that we wait to see some of these things gel. We've had those chevrons there for some time. They were put there without the permission of the board. I will acknowledge that. But my suggestion is that we leave them there until we clear up some of these issues.
If the board decided to remove them, would you be terribly upset?
Well, if it made sense, we wouldn't be terribly upset. If it didn't, we would be. So we still are doing a lot of looking. There's a lot of old information. There's stuff in the DRI that addresses bicycles, and we want to put all of that together before we come to you. We want to have a coherent story that we can present to this board.
Other questions for Phil?
No.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, we are on item 4, the consent agenda, 4A and B, approval of the June 2nd meeting minutes and report of the operation manager. There are items that members of the
Stand by,
board
stand
want to
by.
discuss on the consent agenda.
Be with you in a minute.
Page 78 starts with the minutes. On the minutes here, you were not at the beginning of this meeting.
No, it should.
It shows arrival time.
Later on, it says when you came in.
That's correct.
You know, should we pull that, they're present, and so you, should we pull your name off here at that time?
I don't think so. We haven't done it previously, because it's reflected in the minutes that.
Well,
that you want.
I think
We
you-
can ask Cal, but.
If she was here, I would keep it in, but unless Tony has an objection, feels it's not fairly represented. Tony, the question is that the present and constituting the quorum, Ms. Feinberg is identified as being present. She arrived late, and the minutes do reflect when she got here to the meeting. So should she still be listed at the top?
What page
Of
is
the
that on the
minutes.
agenda?
78 on the page.
78.
Yeah, look at your screen, I got you there. I mean, we could put in parentheses, leave it there, and put in parentheses arrived at.
I think it's appropriate, because it says a quorum was established with 4 supervisors present, and that's line 35. You may want to say, see later on when Ms. Feinberg arrived. That might be
It's
appropriate.
noted.
Yeah.
But I think you may want to put like in parentheses on line 35 as to which 4 supervisors were present at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Quorum was established with 4 supervisors present. That's,
Cal, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay with them the way they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, anything else?
Yeah.
Anything else in the minutes?
Page 90, item 3. Did somebody actually get locked in the dog park because there was a power failure? We lost power to the access control at the dog park. ADT has replaced the unit. And we'll be addressing ways to prevent the gates from being shut when the power is down and residents being locked in. They're trapped.
Yes.
Well, good golly, that's a great feeling. I got it.
It was just a
We
call.
put that at the fun park. How about them apples? Talk about due diligence, huh? Haven't we done anything about that? Like a battery backup or something, for crying out loud?
So we're working, the biggest issue is figuring out why we lost power. We had a real freaky couple of weeks regarding power outages. So part of the problem is, one of the issues that we're dealing with at the fun park is we're starting to replant some of the things. And so when I went down there, you can't latch the gate to the fence because there's bushes there. So we need to clear out some of the bushes so staff can appropriately lock open the gate when we've lost power. And we have been looking at, I know we're putting, there were no surge protectors on the new unit. The surge protectors pre-existed at the pool, so when the new access equipment was installed at the pool, there was surge protection on there. There was no surge protection devices at the dog park. So ADT was nice enough to replace that unit for us under warranty, but it was after a very bad storm event that we had here. And unfortunately, because Friday afternoon was the storm event, there was no one at the dog park because it was storming, and we probably lost power. And then on the weekend, they went in, and yes, they got themselves locked out. That afternoon, staff had actually roped the gate open, but it wasn't adequate because of the bushes. And so someone went in and closed it behind them because we didn't have the appropriate signage up. And yes, they got locked in the dog park and had to phone in. So we need to address that immediately because those are safety issues. But we need to revamp the gate area
All
a little
right,
bit.
so again, I asked the question because I never got the answer. Why don't we have a battery backup?
I will ask to see if that technology is available for that equipment.
Hey, and April, just as curiosity, at the park or the dog park, if there is an issue, how do you know who to call? I mean, would you just call the district number, or
Yes, they called the district number and.
just left a message and?
Yeah, I think we dealt with it. I think actually it might be confusing my events. The dog park issue, I believe, was at the last board meeting. I think I was in here when
When somebody called?
Yeah, when the
Oh, okay.
residents were.
I was just
were
curious.
locked in
I didn't-
in the dog park.
We had a hotline.
Yeah, so yes, we are looking at how to prevent that in the future. Any other questions?
Good one. God help you if it happens after 5 o'clock.
The on-call
I think a
person.
battery backup system has got to be a muy grande, most important revision. We got to do something immediately.
Okay.
I mean, that's inexcusable.
Margaret?
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items 4A and B.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Can I just ask one question?
Good for you, yes.
Page 79, line 51. And it's in regards to the gateway, the lighting. What did we ever decide to do on the lighting on Gateway? I mean, not Gateway, I'm
On
sorry,
Griffin.
Griffin Drive.
I think we decided to do nothing because that belongs to WCI.
Right.
On the east side?
That's their section of road, kiddo.
Going up to 82?
Yeah.
What about on the other side, from Magnolia Lakes down?
No, it doesn't matter which side. We did that as a compliment to you, kiddo. Your thing.
Okay, so, because at one point it was discussed, and I thought Danny was working on some things. You never did find out, did you?
Well,
Okay.
whoops, sorry. Because you had brought it up, that's what I went back and I researched, okay, well, where were we? And so I found the notes and where it had been tabled. And so I've reached out to Danny and I was trying to find a contact, within FP&L, and I was going to kind of revisit the situation. There is an east side versus the west side. It appears that at one point in time, we had a budget, we had a proposal to put the lighting in along the pathway.
Okay, so,
And does it interest the board to bring this item back to the board for approval on the lighting on Griffin?
Does not interest me. Mr. Neubauer?
No, thank you.
it could be a safety issue that I'd like to look at in the future.
We'll take it out of Pam's check.
Well, you won't get anything.
And this is kind of another reason why this report is gonna be effective for us.
But I don't see any reason not to get an updated idea of how much the light installation would be.
We're not in favor of putting lights on Griffin Drive, but we'd like to have an idea how much it would cost in case we change our mind.
Okay, so based on staffing needs and because we're trying to regroup on addressing the things that are priority and deprioritizing some things.
That is not a priority.
Okay, so it's not a priority. I will keep it on the list, and so it doesn't fall off the edge and we don't forget about it, but I'll set it as a low priority right now.
Okay?
Yep.
That's fine.
Okay? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the All items in the consent agenda, may I have a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Okay, item 5, discussion items, we're going straight to 5B.
Where's Danny?
Not here.
Danny's on vacation.
Conveniently, that's nice.
What was that?
Where's Danny?
North Carolina.
Where's Tyler?
Possibly Greece. We were talking about that today.
Man, the lengths those guys will go.
Yeah.
They just pushed me out here. We're gonna tackle this issue. They're well aware of it. And what I basically want to bring to you is the current issue that we're having with Lake 104. And I'm using this as an exercise, a learning experience in preparation of our $6 million lake bank restoration project.
Where is Lake 104?
So Lake 104, instead of entering through the easement that we have, which has mature landscaping on it, it was requested of a neighbor to access through her side yard. And so a couple of things were overlooked for this project. We did not take the time or the money to have a survey. And we had a huge weather event during this project. And so what had happened is they put in the rock, we came in, we said, okay, we're ready for the next phase, we're ready to sod. Well, in between those two things happening, we had a huge rain event, and the water raised up, and we couldn't get the sod in. And so by the time we got the sod in, the water was still up, and so we sodded to the water line. And then the water subsided back down to the control line, and now we have this gap between the rock and the sod. So we need to re-enter the project. However, we've already resodded the neighbor's yard, and so because of this and the access issues that Mr. Tinkle referenced earlier, we need to address, and I'm hoping that we can, whatever decision we make here, whatever direction you give me here, we need to develop a plan, an access plan, on how we're going to approach these next 13 lakes. Because if we go in, and I'm recommending that we stay on our property for these projects, that we take our easement, we stay on our property. We do a lot of pre-planning in a pre-project meeting, and we make sure that the contractors understand that there's been to be no verbal approvals by neighbors, and stay out of the neighbor's yard, stay on our property. With that said, what I'm asking for is permission to access the easement, our easement at Lake 104, and work with legal, because there's going to be some backlash from that. There's a huge amount of mature vegetation there. And what we found out is that depending on what community that we're in, there could be an HOA agreement where the HOA has actually dictated to the residents that they had to plant there. So we're going to run up against the issue of if we remove the vegetation, whose responsibility is it to put it back? And if we remove it, we're not going to be able to exchange it in kind. We're not going to be able to replant all of this 25-year-old landscaping. So we're going to have those issues, and so I think we need to take this as an exercise. Whatever we do here, we need to develop a plan, because those issues are gonna have to be peeled back, and I think it's gonna take an education and communication project, work with these HOAs, give them plenty of time to let them know that we're coming in, we're going to access our easements, and we're clearing this stuff out. And what our responsibility is, what we're willing to do as a district, and what our legal responsibility is to replenish that easement.
All right, on 104, well, we thought we were finished, but we're not. Can't we just hire some high school or college students to carry that sod in on their shoulder like we used to to, you know, we don't have to bring in dump trucks, do we?
Stone, not sod.
It's stone, and I think there's quite a bit
Well,
that needs to be brought in.
1,000 trips.
So, on this, on 104, please make it clear to me, they had to haul this stuff in prior, they just weren't able to finish it, so what is the issue with hauling it in the same way this time?
It's in the neighbor's yard. It did not go well. We overstayed our welcome because the project took longer.
Yeah.
And so now we're wanting to, and we've already resodded it, it's already been put back together, and, we would again have to approach the neighbor and ask permission, and I don't think that would be appropriate, because I'm trying to establish how are we going to approach this future project?
Okay.
Are we getting this involved with the neighbors?
And the reason we went over the neighbor's property was because somebody has planted in the lake maintenance easement.
Yes,
or the
so
drainage
I gave you
easement.
some pictures.
No, the drainage easement.
Yeah, I guess for clarification, if I may, I think when we talk about, when we even go over people's property, if we have an easement, you know, they may own the underlying fee, simple interest, but the district, if it has an easement, has what's called a dominant estate.
Right.
So apparently in this instance, we went over an area which we did not have an easement, but had an understanding with the individual, we would use that because it sounds as if, and I didn't see it anywhere, but it sounds as if the idea was there'd be less impact by going the other route than going down the drainage easement that we did have. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason is that the drainage easement has been planted by a neighbor.
Yes, I provided you some pictures, so this is the mature landscaping that is really, I'm not sure exactly, we haven't had it surveyed yet, we haven't got that detailed into it, because I wanted you to understand the
Right.
dilemma that we're facing, and we kinda need to develop a strategy of how we're going to approach this property, and then the future lake.
Are we talking about the
lakes.
tree or just the plant?
It'll be there's mature vegetation pretty much all the way back to the lake bank.
Now, if they have, I don't know how the different HOAs have handled this. I will say that in Stony Brook, we've told people they should not plant in the drainage easement or the lake maintenance easement. But if they have, it's a matter of, you need to understand that if maintenance is done and those are removed, oh well.
And this is the planning that we need to do for the restoration project, because I think we're going to find that the individual communities may have received different communication.
Okay, but we're digressing. What are we gonna do on 104?
Right.
What I'm asking for is to give permission for staff to access our easement and work with legal, get it appropriately surveyed, and address the obstacles and stay on our property.
Stay within our easement.
Yes, stay within our easement.
I agree with that.
You still didn't say where Lake 104 is.
Hampton Green.
Hampton Greens.
Where?
West side.
Is it,
Behind
is it
Rosemont Drive.
Rosemont?
Right next to the golf.
Yeah, Rosemont Drive.
It's,
It's one of those three that are identical, right?
Right.
no,
Right
no,
there.
that's
No.
safe.
So Gary, that,
Is this the one where before the people had lost their lake bank to the point that?
Yep.
Okay, now I know the house. Okay, been there. Okay.
But, so you're,
Oh, I've been to the house.
I'm getting a headache.
I'm
okay?
sorry.
You're asking us to approve a recommendation allowing our folks to access our easement to go back in and finish the work that we were unable to complete earlier, but we're going to incur the wrath of the residents because we're gonna take out their shrubbery or whatever. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think there's going to be, in this particular instance, and in the future rehab projects for the lake, that we would have to deal with those situations. Either way, we have the access issue to deal with. We have to figure out, fairly overlooked it in the pre-planning of this project, because I don't think we have survey costs in there, and we haven't addressed access, because if we do take our easement, we haven't included in the costs, taking out the vegetation and then potentially replacing any vegetation. We haven't addressed it in the overall project, so I believe that this particular instance is a good working exercise for us to figure out, this is something that we need to deal with.
Have you talked to the owners about this?
Yes.
And what did they say to you?
Well, I believe that we've already planted the sod, and that she wants us to stay out of her yard.
I guess when you say stay out of the yard, stay out of that portion of your yard, which we
We've-
do not have an easement that we used the first time.
Correct. We
Okay.
wiggled around the easement and got permission from the neighbor to access, we're literally in her yard. And not only do we have other issues that creep up, the irrigation. Once we mess up people's irrigation, then we have to go back in and fix the irrigation. And there's also been an assumption that when we're going in and fixing these lake banks, that the irrigation systems there are operable. So what is happening on another lake, which I will bring back to you on the 21st, is that we have an irrigation issue, and now we have to determine, is there truly an irrigation issue? Because now we've adjusted their system. So we're taking on some liability that we haven't completely created a plan for.
Yeah, if I'm thinking about it, one, we want to stay on our easement just because it limits, our, or it increases our ability to control it. I think every time you put a piece of machinery or you go across a resident's yard, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of options or different issues. So I think that's going to be hard for us to manage, and we're going to have to manage that on an individual basis every time. If we can come up with a standard of using our easements, we can at least determine whether we're going to replace plant material as close to whatever we determine, or not at all. At least we can control that. We come up with a policy, and it's blanketed throughout the whole project.
Mr. Banks, on that line, along those lines too, some of the easements that we have are in the way of platted drainage easements.
What's that?
They're platted. Some of them are by plats, where drainage easements dedicated to the district, or lake maintenance easements dedicated to the district, or an access easement. Some of the other easements, and without knowing the exact lakes and looking at the exact instruments, may be separate grants of easement. And so there might be conditions in some of those grants of easement that may not be there on the district in the dedicated easement. So that becomes a lake-by-lake analysis.
Yeah, and I think we have a primary or a preferred method, which is what we would try to do with the easements. And then if we ran into any issues, we'd have to handle them on an individual basis.
I have the luxury of sitting here looking at the aerial view of the actual property where they're going down. And the people, it seems quite apparent on both sides, not only subject but next door neighbor, have planted tremendously in our easement. So, believe me, this picture is quite.
Can I come over and look at it?
Yeah, you should take a look. You should take a look.
What is it?
Take a look.
Pass it around. This is the property, and it's on the north side. This is the area there.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I think we
Here's
need our,
one
I think we
for that.
need our boat back.
Hey,
Yeah, that's-
we haven't given it away yet,
It's
Bill.
20 feet in width, 10 feet on
They
each
can load-
property.
They can load that sod up and go across there and plant it, what the heck?
I wanna know what we're gonna do to maintain a fish barrier without the boat. At $1,500
I think
bucks.
that's
We'll put that sucker in
you
your
plant
backyard.
it in your own room.
We'll zip up and down the lake.
I don't think we
And they
have.
just rolled snake
It's got a
eyes.
brand new engine in it. It's never been used. It's ridiculous. All right, so what are we gonna do if in fact, what happens when, let's go to the basics. We're gonna be faced with the same situation again. What's our position? As far as we need to get back there, but you guys have planted, what's our position?
if you want to know the legal position, is that to the extent that the utilization by the fee simple, in easements, the grantee under the grant of easement, in this case, the district is the dedicated with the drainage easement, we are the dominant estate. The servient estate is the landowner because the easement rights are provided to the district. The servient estate owner, or the owner, cannot interfere with utilization of our easement. So the question becomes, are they interfering with our drainage easement by all this vegetation? I think at first blush, the answer would be yes.
So the question is.
The practical
when
aspect.
They come to us with a shotgun. What are
I,
we gonna
no, I
say?
understand there's a legal, then there's the practical. And so, I mean, that's one of those educational aspects is, it's difficult when you say, you acquired the property, you may or may not have realized that there's a platted easement for drainage purposes. And quite frankly, every community runs into this, particularly when people in their front yards think it's their front yard and it's really the cities or the counties. And they put mailboxes, sable palms, irrigation lines, and the county comes along and says, we need to clean out this ditch. And there happens to be an irrigation line in that ditch, and it may just be broken, and it's just, okay, there may not be liability on the part of the local government entity. So this gets back to what April was saying about the discussion with the neighbors, say, listen, we have this easement, and I don't think this board is of a mindset to play, I'll call it hardball and bulldozer. I think the board's a very practical approaching board, and it's a policy decision ultimately. Again, I believe we have the legal right to go in there and do whatever we need to do to gain access and utilize the easement, but then you get the practical approach with the mature vegetation. How do you try to minimize, if that's the board's desire, which is probably the right approach, minimize the negative impact? And again, there might be other instances with other easements where it says the grantee shall restore the lands to the original condition after utilization of the easement. There are some grants of easement separate and apart from this dedicated
Do
easement.
we know what this one is?
This is on the plat.
This is platted.
Correct, it does not have that restorative language contained in it.
Correct.
Mr. Tinkle is having jumping up and down here.
Well,
Actually, it's his
simply put,
property, that's why
we got a mess. We got a mess in Gateway that was given to us by Westinghouse Communities, Inc. The issue is, and Tony's 100% correct, what they are, they're tracks that are shown on the plats, and they give the CDD ingress egress capability across either a 7.5 foot on both sides or 10 foot on both sides of the deal. What it doesn't say is who's at responsibility to replace the damage caused by whatever construction work you do. The problem we've got, because I wear the other hat, is that in Gateway Greens, and this is again not an HOA deal. It's an HOA deal now because we inherited it from, again, Westinghouse Communities. But every property owner in all of our additions were given one of these by WCI Westinghouse when they built. They were forced to put the vegetation on those common property lines. I am a good example. I did mine in 2005. I could not get mine approved until WCI stamped the approval of the landscape architect, and I had to put it right down the property line, as did my neighbor. So I think what Tony needs to do is,
Your history is very interesting, but it's not helping me.
Well, Bill, what I'm trying to get to,
How about a solution?
I'm trying to get there, Bill. You've got to have the background. The background is Tony's got to do the research to come back and tell you if you have the legal right on that to go in and force the property owner to put the vegetation back.
We should have made this $7 million.
I'm trying, well, Bill,
Or zero.
Bill, you're going right to where I think you're gonna end up. My opinion is, I aired it to Tony and to April. My opinion at this point in time, going and looking at the 13 ponds, and I've sent both of them an email. For the most part, this is not gonna be that complicated on those 13 ponds because we have common area access. 104 is a bad one, and 110 over in Devonshire, 104 is a cupcake compared to 110 in Devonshire. There's no place to get in there.
We just won't do it then.
Well,
We don't have to tell that to South Florida. The issue is,
well, let me ask
my
you
point is
something.
put it in the
You
budget.
stated that WCI, which but then you called it Westinghouse Community.
That's who started it.
Trust me, I used to work for the other. So, for clarification purposes, WCI started out as Westinghouse Communities Incorporated, if you didn't know that. Then this other company called Florida Design Communities actually purchased the assets and conveniently used WCI.
Was this
So,
before
get,
Bay
this is,
Bridge?
this is.
Before.
This is the actual paperwork.
That is
Is
the.
there
des-
anything more to this?
I checked, Gary, that's straight from the design review manual that was given to all the residents that moved into Gateway in the period of 1990 to present. That's the manual we have. We're trying to change that. Our problem is we got now is these are covenants. These were put in as covenants. So our HOA has no legal authority to go in and change them without a
Do you have
vote.
a copy of those covenants that?
Tony
direct
does. Tony does.
I have Gateway Greens covenant. yeah.
Gateway Greens covenants. And I'm sure all the rest of them in Gateway are the same. They just cookie cuttered this whole thing. The issue is, and Bill, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I've told April, I think what we do is go in and look at each one of these. Right now, 104 is the big one, because it's imminent. We gotta get that mess
Gary,
cleaned
Gary,
up.
I've got the solution. We're just gonna load the side in a boat and take it across the lake. and put it
Absolutely, we're
down.
not giving that sucker.
If you,
up.
Let's
if you could,
airdrop it.
if you could get to the other
Helicopter, you got your
side.
pilot's license?
Bill, what I suggested
I'll
is,
do a firebomb drop.
what I suggested is maybe coming up the golf course.
I'm sorry.
With the trucks of stone. We're talking about, guys, one heck of a lot of stone that needs to be hauled in there. A lot of stone.
Yeah, my concern though, and I'll address it in the memo to the board when we do this, is don't want to be construed as having abandoned our easement by not ever utilizing it. And that can be the case if we say we're never going to go down and remove the vegetation and use the easement. That's a concern.
Well, we gotta figure out who's responsible for replacing the
Yeah,
vegetation.
my first blush reaction is the district doesn't have does not under this grant of easement, does not, but I haven't finalized the memo on that. Again, if there are separate grants of easement out there, it may be a different story.
Don't have looked, I cannot find one on any of the 13 Phase 1 ponds.
So what's
Not
the
a one.
Can't you
time?
just give us an easy solution we can vote on?
It's not easy.
I could start a Bobcat company.
It's not easy.
Landscape
So
vegetation
what's the
removal company.
time constraint on this? Do you understand what?
I think that
So we
you
get
need,
a
you need legal
reading.
opinion, I believe.
Correct.
That one identifies that the property owner is responsible, and forgetting all the hell that's gonna break loose when you come up with that opinion. But you need a legal opinion that you
Thank you.
have the responsibility and the capability of going in and removing that vegetation. And the owners have to replace it at their own expense. And keep in mind, when you enter that easement, it's always two, because they split it half and half.
Correct. We were just looking.
That gets back to the concept of surveying to make sure we're within the bounds of the easement.
Yeah.
Yeah, now what April was saying before is exactly true, and the way they did it was exactly the way I would have done it. They saw that they had this vegetation in the way, so they went over and had an arrangement with the property owner to try to avoid that by just tearing up sod. And what the frustration is down there in that area is that it just took so long that they got frustrated and
So
said, we're not gonna do that
that-
again.
Is that person communicable? Meaning, if somebody like Bill goes down there and tries to talk to them, will they speak with him?
If they are going to be told that they have to replace the.
No, we're trying to.
But they're gonna ask that question, Gary, because you're going to go down and say that we need to take out your vegetation to
Did it
access
the
it.
first time.
But they didn't
They
go,
did.
they didn't go on the easement, they went off the easement. And I think that's
That's
what Tony is saying,
okay,
don't
then Let me
do.
clarify. Hold on. If we go back and do what we did the first time, is that party who granted us that access willing to speak to us if we explain expediently to them?
The
unlike
alternative?
This long-winded thing, why we really need to do that and assure them, and then Bill will take them out to dinner.
I thought that's what April kind of tried to say, is that they'd done that, and she said, no, we don't want you back.
Well, then maybe we need Bill, he's smooth.
No,
So
yeah.
should we-
I'll just tell them we'll pay.
It's a tough one,
pay to have
guys.
their-
So
It's a
should-
tough
have
issue.
Their landscaping replaced.
So should we?
To
do
me,
a-
I think that's the answer.
Should we do a survey and show them some things in writing?
I
Should
think we need to survey, period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
that-
My
that's-
unfortunate thing is that I can tell you their first phone call after you come down there.
Okay, well, let's.
I'm gonna get the phone call.
Okay, we're gonna authorize
So,
the
but
staff
that's
to
the
work
issue.
with the district council, the district engineer.
That's the answer.
To access two drainage easements on 104.
That's the answer.
Can I have a recommendation, can I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
I have a motion from Margaret and a second from Mr. What? Who are you?
Can I approach?
Sure. You're gonna, wait a minute, you gotta be talking on this subject. On this subject.
I will be. I'm Angela Lucian, and My property is the property in question here. I'm at 11830
Fantastic.
In which
Rosemont
question, though,
Drive.
Andrea, in which question, are you the, or are you the previous access, or?
Well, I purchased the property in December of 2014. It was in vacant possession for about a year. I just recently moved in last October. Was immediately hit with approximately 6 courtesy notices from.
What, please?
Courtesy notice.
6 courtesy notices, that's sort of an aside. I was unaware that this property at the time, and this is a buyer beware caveat and all the rest, had this easement. I've had 2 or 3 conversations with Ms. White here, and, you know, and I did try and work with the contractor in terms of where this easement is and what's planted on it. As I told you, I would never have planted on an easement. It was an existing condition when I moved in, and, you know, to answer some of the, to respond to some of the narrative here, I really have no problems. That's why I allowed the contractor, I was trying to work with him to facilitate this project. And obviously, to go around that landscaping, I have to say I'm confounded that the property was not, that property line was not surveyed before. I saw, I mean, I'm right there, so I've witnessed this entire thing. And it has, you know, really put a lot of pressure on the property, this particular project. In part due to the weather, and I understand that's part of, you know, but there was a lot of pressure put on the property, and a lot of coming and going, a lot of my side yard that was not part of the designated path from the street was utilized. I had numerous calls from the gate wanting to, for subcontractors to the contractor, wanting to, using my address and consequently my phone number as an entry point for delivery of materials and equipment. I had at least 2 or 3 conversations about trying to put that to a stop, that other arrangements need to be made for the contractor and the subcontractor through Gateway Services, whatever, to have a number to contact when somebody's at that gate, that this is who they call. They've been pre-authorized. So it has been.
Nightmare.
Yeah, it has. This has not been a pleasant experience for me. Having said all of that, I understand the issue, and it is a big one, going forward with, apparently I've been the guinea pig, you know, on the pond restoration project, my property that is, and, you know, I fully appreciate the situation going forth in terms of resolving these easement issues. As I said, I would never, I mean, I don't know about covenants, prior history, I'm not, you know, I'm just trying to get the boxes unpacked still. But I'm certainly, and I'm certainly willing to work with Gateway Services to bring this project to a completion if we can do that without uprooting that planting bed. That would probably, that's why I gave him permission. But what I see right now in terms of the restoration, the resodding of that side yard, is totally, it's a mess, you know.
Wait a minute. The previous work you're talking about? The previous sodding of the side yard?
Well, yeah, the resodding. I mean, they were in heavy equipment after the rain, up to their axles.
So it's not graded,
So they
it's
didn't
not.
grade
They,
didn't
and
grade the
instead of
land.
coming in and regrading,
Yeah.
and I don't mean filling in holes. I mean, they had quite a bit of dirt. I'll call it dirt. It wasn't loamy. It was really dirt. They were using it to regrade the pond. They were using it in the project to regrade portions of the pond. And what was left over at the end of the project was left at the street, and there was about 2 or 3, 4 mounds of it. And so that part was easily graded, because they just, they could grade it. But as you move back toward the pond, and we're talking ruts, there was nothing to grade. The sodding contractor, the sodding sub just came in and they kind of moved the dirt around and then pounced this sod in. The job is to say I'm disappointed
Yeah.
is really an understatement, and I don't want to overstate, but I'll just say this: when I was contacted initially by Gateway Services, because this project, I believe, was supposed to take place a year ago, and you had contractor problems and whatever the issues were there, I was assured that I wouldn't know anybody had ever been there. And I can tell you that if you could walk it, you would want to be careful. You could break an ankle out there, and there's a trough. I mean, I actually brought my landscaper in after the job was completed, because I thought it was finished, because they had resodded, and because I wanted a second opinion, to tell you the truth. I wanted a second opinion on my own evaluation, so what I wanted to say is that you're gonna have an issue going forward, I can see, because I've obviously been observing all of this. I don't want to be a problem. I mean, I'm not interested in making issues with Gateway Services, or, if we all benefit from the pond reconstruction. I just would like to have my property restored to the condition that it was left in, and right now, the sod is et cetera, et cetera.
So
Okay.
I have a question for you, and it may sound ridiculous, but it sounds like we need standard operating procedures and some checks and balances and some things when we go in and do this project. And you've been very gracious so far. It seems like there's some
I'm a recovering
there's
architect.
some rework that needs to be done on your property. If we were to, April, work with our teams to put better procedures in place, I hate to say use you as a guinea pig again, but if we need to get back into that lake, would you allow us access back in, and let's do your property right the second time?
Yes, that's,
Okay.
as I say, I'm amenable.
And you can
quite
work with April to
frankly,
say-
if you wanted to tear out the landscaping, have at it. I wouldn't put it back, because I would never plant on an easement,
Okay.
as I've said. But it's
And you can be very
there.
clear with April, these are the things that I don't want to happen
It's
again.
there.
You can't go back in?
I can't allow
He's
that.
talking
He's talking
about,
about his
he's talking about
property.
his other property, not this one.
The covenants will allow that to be taken out and not put back.
We don't.
Oh, no, we're talking about
we
this-
just- we
we're
just
talking about
want
104.
restrict to
No, I
104.
understand what she's
Yeah,
saying.
okay.
But if she said, take that out, I wouldn't put it back.
Yeah, okay.
Something's got to
Yeah.
go back.
Okay.
Something's got to go back.
So, but that you would be willing to do that, give us a second chance to
I
complete
would-
this work? with-
Yes, as I
okay.
say, I mean, I'd be happy to work with Gateway.
And we'll,
And
we'll guarantee we do the work right the second time,
I
and,
think the-
and you can work with April on the things that
But
you
I mean, but you have
must
to
have.
understand, I mean, I had people climbing all over
I
my
understand.
property, front, back, sides, everywhere,
Yeah, okay.
for
Well, that's better
weeks,
vendor management that we need. Okay.
So,
Yes, I saw
Mr.
that.
Chairman,
So hold on.
two comments if I may. I would suggest that in the future when we do this also, that we enter into a temporary access easement with the property owner as opposed to just a verbal. That outlines the rights, duties, and obligations of both parties. It gives the extent of what work we can do and also any protections to the property owner. That's what every local government does. They get a temporary access easement in writing. And it's only for a limited purpose, and it defines the area, the scope, the width, everything. Secondly, I may disagree with Mr. Tinkle down the road that whether or not the covenants apply to the district. In other words, if we have we have a governmental entity with the utility operation, a stormwater utility, and the planting vegetation and the landscape easement interferes with our easement, or drainage easement interferes with our easement, we may have a little bit of tension on our hands down the road as far as the ability to replant in our drainage easement to the extent it interferes. But that's a discussion we can have.
Thanks for that information, but I want to get this item finished tonight, and I'm here to applaud you for your putting up with what we have put through.
Again, I tried to get you dinner. Now, don't waver. force that issue.
The other thing I'd like to say is, I think, April, that there is something that we can do so that the homeowner is not interrupted on her personal time about people getting, our people getting access into
That's
her
what we need to
community.
work on, better staging planning, and that was another issue that kind of brought up conversations about how this facility could be utilized.
There could be a
and-
general access number, right, Ed? Just to.
Keep in mind, this project was not engineered, guys.
Okay.
This project was a happen,
All right.
because nobody wanted to pay the money. The prior chairman didn't want to pay the money to have it done right. That's how we got
Right,
into this mess.
right, we've gone
We
in,
tried
we
to
were
rush it
correcting a
through.
failure.
We tried to rush it through.
Okay.
Again, I thank you, but I neglected to write down your name. Would you help me, please?
Angela, A-N-G, I'm signed in over here, at Rosemount, A-N-G-E-L-A, Lucien, L-U-C-I-E-N.
Say the last one again, please.
L-U-C-I-E-N,
Lucien.
Lucien.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your cooperation on this, and we'll do our darndest to make you proud.
I would appreciate that, I really would, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, we have a motion and a second to approve this.
Who
project.
seconded?
I'll second.
Okay.
You're not done?
I'm sorry. So, not to, burst the celebration here of, and I greatly appreciate your cooperation, but there is a third party involved here, and that's the contractor. And I provided in the email packet, that the contractor was burdened by the access that we provided him as well through this process. And so it may not be as simple now as just, coming up with a written agreement with Ms. Lucien to access her property again. We do have some financial issues to work out on whether or not the contractor is going to fund the replacement. So he's not going to incorporate the replacement of the sod again. That's going to be on us. And also, he has made it clear that without providing legal access, he doesn't want to come back in to this project.
Legal access to.
Well, we just granted that.
So, well, I think we would have to escalate this issue
Yeah.
to what the attorney is suggesting, is that we take it to a higher level as far as a written agreement
Yeah.
with Ms.
Oh, yeah,
Lucien.
so
Yeah.
temporary access.
Yeah.
Who's the contractor?
Extreme dive.
Extreme Drivers.
Well, extreme divers should need to know and should see the pictures that were they the ones responsible for the replacement of the sod?
Yes.
Fine. Then they didn't do their job adequately, so we also have a position.
Yes, and we have been addressing that, and there is a small area that is in question on the sod, but the rest of the sod, I mean, they did take a great deal of effort to smooth out the yard. They had a roller in there and everything. I mean, they did take a great deal of effort.
But there still
To
were
correct
those
that.
trenches that we're
It's-
seeing in the picture.
Yeah, we went out and evaluated it, and it is fairly minor. The argument from the contractor's perspective is that the grow-in will correct it. And of course, the argument from the neighbor's perspective is that it's too deep and the grow-in isn't going to correct it. So we still have those hurdles that we need to deal with. I mean, I'll be happy to move forward with the acceptance, and we'll approach it this way. I just wanted you to be aware that there is a third party here, and that's the contractor, and he's going to have to, we still have another layer of logistics to work out.
We're now aware. Thank you very
Okay.
much. I have a motion and a second. May I have a vote in favor of the recommendation on Lake 104? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Bill, Danny or Tyler's got to be directly involved with this.
Damn right. Did you say aye?
Yeah.
Yeah.
5-0, Cal.
Make sure that that's a part of this. They've got to.
Yeah. You heard Bill and Gary, so make sure we've got Danny and
And they are. Tyler inspects the projects weekly. He's been involved the whole entire time.
Okay, let's go to C. We're gonna purchase a utility vehicle. April, would you, give us a few minutes of background on that? Page 121.
What we're requesting is authorization to purchase another utility vehicle, a 4-seat John Deere. What we plan on utilizing this vehicle for is we've taken the transit van. The transit van was being underutilized. I believe when we purchased the transit van, we initially started out for a pickup truck. Because of the delay of the purchase, the pickup truck went away. We ended up with a transit van. When I got here, the transit van is fairly empty, and we haven't needed the entire space. So utilities has a lot of parts, they have a lot of maintenance that they have to do on lift stations. We have an inventory of the AMI readers. We have inventory items for meter installation. We have things that we need for when the staff is on call and they come out to make a repair. So we're inventorying the transit van, and that has been slid over to utilities, and they are utilizing the transit van to its full capacity. We've put in shelving. We're working on an inventory replacement process. I've been working with ST staff to make sure that we're following the guidelines of running an inventory. They're perfectly fine with our plan. So now we've got the transit van utilized, but I think that what we need is another utility vehicle. We've been working on the inspection reports for the facilities. We have dusted off an inspection process that L used to do, and we've enhanced that process. We intend for the facility supervisor to utilize this most of the time, and he will be driving up and down the paved paths from one end of the district to the other. It gets him closer to the facilities. He can ride out on the soccer field. He can address those issues more closely. He can access the FPNL easement to the pool, and in the event that he needs a larger piece of equipment that he can't carry in the gator, he would just have to utilize a pickup truck and run it over there. It's mainly the pool facility because, you know, we're just across the street here from the sports complex. So we think that the utility vehicle will be much more utilized, much more efficient, and much more effective for what he needs to do. And also, it can be utilized during our lake bank restoration because there's been several road walkthrough, lake bank walkthroughs where we're with WCI staff, we're with our engineer, L, myself, or the county employees, where we would have liked to have utilized the gator, but the current ones that we have, to pull them out from the utility staff for too long, then they're kind of down. We're short on vehicles overall. We still need another vehicle, so this is like the first layer of trying to become more effective. But we'll also be able to use this 4-seater gator for that project as well. So when we need it for those inspections, we can fit 4 in there and actually access the lakes.
Questions for April? I have 2.
Okay.
When you talk about a transit van, are you talking about the Ford F-150 van that we bought a year ago?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
On page 124 of our agenda, there are several there are several items that are added on here. This Kubota loader costs $4,270.
So the Kubota was the other unit that we were looking at. So we did some price comparisons and we looked at some features and things like that. And it was decided that the John Deere is the 4-seater is actually the one that we want to go with. I was just trying to show you that we did look at other options, and we think that the 4-seater John Deere is the more practical one for this application.
And the John Deere one is
cheaper.
on page 123. 3, I believe, and cheaper.
Yes, and we'd be purchasing it on a state contract.
Even better.
Okay, and there's no sales tax.
Nope,
on-
we're
on
exempt from
this one
sales
like
tax.
there was on the others, because we're sales tax exempt.
Staff has been working on, we've renegotiated the, shop area. We did some cleaning out, we, surplused some old material, so we've got cash to apply to that. We're trading in the tractor in the back, so that's gonna help clean up the facility. So once we get the tractor out of there, we're gonna renegotiate some items behind the building, and we're also vetting the boat for sale as well. So we hope that, you know, in order to, offset, the cost to the gator, we have that revenue source coming in.
Hey, April, I'm just curious. I mean, you said we're vehicle deficient. What, do you think we'll need another gator down the road? I mean, is that
Well,
where you're?
well, so I tried to outline real quick and dirty, how our current fleet is being utilized with the two gators, and who would be utilizing the new gator. And if you see, utilities pretty much they're always in the transit, they're always in the 550, that's the lift. And typically how staff is running, that if whoever's in the lift, the other utility staff member is in the 150. So because utilities has more, they're out all the time. So it forces the 150 that's left to be utilized by, it's a shared vehicle. Sometimes Elle doesn't have a vehicle to actually go to a pond. She doesn't have, there are times where she does not have a vehicle. And also now we have a utilities manager back on board. It's like we have an inspection over in Pelican where they had blocked up the dam on the construction, and it's a construction site. And because we don't want employees utilizing their personal vehicles on a construction site, the utilities manager was going to assist with monitoring that, because we really need somebody out there. On this construction site, we've got big earth movers and stuff. A lot can happen in a day as far as our water flow. And we don't have a vehicle for him to get out there and visit this site. Tyler went out in his F-150, and after correcting the project manager out there that he needed to unclear it, he had to kindly request somebody to pull his truck out.
I was just curious if the need is gonna have you come back in 6 months when the lake stuff and say, hey, we need another one. Because sometimes, I didn't know if we could get, if there's discount pricing if, let's say if we had 2 versus 1. I'm just curious.
On the gators or another pickup, or what are we
Well, I
talking
don't know
about?
if you need another, anyway, never mind.
So, but anyway, I wanted to take this opportunity to have this discussion that I still believe that we're vehicle deficient, and we're probably going to have to address that in the near future.
May I have a motion to approve item 5C on the utility vehicle purchase?
So moved.
I have a motion, and I have a second.
Second.
And I have a second. Any further conversation?
A couple things. First of all, the boat that was purchased for maintaining the fish barrier. There hasn't been, to the best of my knowledge, any fish barrier maintenance that's ever been done.
What's the fish barrier? Is that the in-between?
That's that thing that I said you need to go out and take a look at.
Okay.
Okay? When I came on board, coming up on 8 years ago, that was one of the first things that I went out and looked at, one of the first things I told Bill to go look at when he came on board.
I did.
And as it comes out of I-75 and it does a 90-degree turn, and suddenly it goes, and here's this huge structure that we had to put in a new one, because 8 years ago, the one at that time was literally falling apart. Also discovered that the channel that was there was completely debris filled. So it was choking and it wasn't properly guided, and we had that all excavated. Did that. But the fish barrier needs periodic, regular maintenance, and the boat was purchased for that, plus in addition to that, at various times, to have access into any of the lakes within the community. And so what we have is a brand-new boat with a brand-new trailer and a brand-new engine. We're talking about giving it away for $1,500.
So you wanna keep it?
Darn straight.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Secondly is, my man just went online and found a Gator brand spanking new with 4 seats. $9,873.
Where's that at?
I guess all depends on the make or model, because there's about 4 different types of 4-seat models.
So $15,000, $324.22 seems a little bit highish. I think we need to be better negotiators, but then again, that's kind of my cup of tea. But
Okay.
I don't agree with the numbers. Doug would be a good negotiator. I think he ought to go to, for it.
You
This
see
call-
how,
this
see how
call-
he gives jobs away?
He just said it was his
He only
forte.
does that for his friends.
No, I think it'd be a good thing for Doug to get his feet wet. He'll come back and he'll tell me that I'm crazy, and that's okay.
This was a larger unit because we got a larger, heavier unit, so the pressure washer units could be pulled
Bet you
behind
can
it.
save $1,000, Doug.
Yeah, well, I got a day job.
So do I. That's okay.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 1, 4 to 1.
Thank you.
It's two.
I'm sorry.
It's two, I just think that we could do, a little bit more work to see what other, negotiations that she could come back with. Tony can look it up and come back with 9,000.
Is it the same
She
unit?
just-
It's the same, it's a smaller model, but there are multiple models. That's what I was
So
just.
there's multiple models.
Absolutely.
Tony's just making trouble for us.
Well, and
No, I'm just,
we can interpret your motion as a not to exceed, and April can look at those options, and if she can find it cheaper, she's got a not to
And are we
exceed.
still giving the boat away?
Let's keep the vote for now.
Okay, that item was approved
I know,
previously
yeah.
for disposal, so are you saying now keep the boats?
Let's keep the vote.
Okay, yeah, so the dilemma is that the boat has been used 3 times, and it's 2 or 3 times in its lifetime. So
If
we,
nothing
Gary and I are gonna take it out.
Should be part of the training program, for crying out loud. Let's go.
so we've been trying to, get the boat out of the shop because it's basically in the way. But if we so desire to keep the boats that we're not utilizing, I mean, I was going to put it on for sale.
I've just put a cover on it and put it over here in the lot where all the other stuff is. That's what I'd
We're
probably
gonna
do.
take it over on the other side of 75.
Yeah.
Look at the fish.
Absolutely.
Okay, so keep the boat.
Yeah.
That's gonna be the next team
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
sport.
Okay, we have a 4 to 1.
Yep.
It's a little.
We're changing it to not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Pelican Reserve Storm Pipe Inspection Proposal B.
Where?
I know I'm troublemaker.
Good man, I like that. 5 where? D. Ah, yes. Before we go for the narrative, explain to me why the CDD should pay $10,500 instead of the person that's delivering this stuff for us to maintain ever after, and especially since the debacle of 2000 and when in Pelican Preserve, where we found things that weren't even connected with the drainage system, yet we're supposed to take something at someone's word.
So we did have clarification provided by the engineer, that GSCDD is paying for additional inspections that are being requested by the Ponds Group, since the majority of Track L was permitted prior to the requirement for TVing storm pipes. WCI is not obligated to perform these inspections as part of the development turnover, but PPAC has decided, the Ponds Group had decided that they didn't want to take it over without having the pipes TV'd.
So this is part of the 002 fund. That's where the funds would come from.
Yes.
I have to defer to Mr. Gephardt on that. He feels very strongly
Oh, I don't doubt that they need it, but there is no way in heck that I support that we're supposed to pay for it. Not after what they did to us before. Didn't
That
even-
was the old WCI.
No, no. Well, whatever WCI, it was the WCI that virtually flooded our neighborhood and had the water coming up to Bill and my back door, and I mean, at our back door.
April,
I'm not sure I think so.
do you know what fund and account is supposed to be charged for this $10,500 recommendation?
Yes, it would be, Pelicans.
Be
Fund.
O2?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's O2, the waterways, it's a water.
Well, Mr. Newbauer seems to be heading toward a negative vote on that. Is that correct, Mr. Newbauer?
Unquestionably. No,
Since Mr. Gephardt, who we all know and love, thinks it's important that this be done, how are we going
I just
to-
can't.
How are we gonna resolve it?
Well, you're gonna outvote me numerically, but
No, that's not necessarily so.
I'm gonna make a.
I've voted with you once or twice.
Something about freezing over, but in any case.
Even during the same meeting.
I'm sorry, WCI should pay. We established even at the last meeting, that when you're turning over something to this organization to take care of it, you need to prove to us from the get-go that it's right. And we
Somebody
shouldn't
said-
pay for that.
Somebody said the WCI has alleged that they're not responsible for paying for this. Who said that?
I don't know if they've been asked. I asked the question, and then Tyler responded as April read the email, that we're paying, district is paying for the additional inspections that are being requested by the Ponds Group. Then he said, since the majority of Tract L was permitted prior to the requirement for TVing storm pipes, WCI is not obligated to perform these inspections as part of the development turnover. That was Tyler's email.
I'd say we table this until maybe we either reach out to them or get some more
I'll
clarification
talk
from
with
Danny and
Bob.
Yeah.
Because I'm not comfortable voting on it
Yeah,
today.
and just from a sense of perspective, the Tract L turnover is in process. The packages have been submitted, and I think this is necessary for the district to accept these conveyances, is that correct?
That's correct.
Of the stormwater.
And
I know the WCI.
this will delay the conveyance of Track L.
Correct, WCI wants.
Because the Ponds Group wants these pictures, regardless of who may do them. Gary may be right, maybe WCI needs to do them, but they want these pictures before we have this conveyed to us.
True. So,
Phil, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
you have the floor if you want it.
no, I'll definitely speak with Bob, and I think we'll coordinate a meeting between Bob and you and Mr. Caldwell and me.
Yeah, and from a sense, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, Phil, there's no real damage done if we defer this and the turnover of Tract L, am I correct?
That's no damage done. And in fact, we are still, as I explained to Tony today, or in fact, I think I put it in the report, we're still waiting for information on the roads that we have issues with as well. And so we don't wanna go to conveyance before we have all these issues wrapped up. So, no problem with delaying.
Yeah, from a sense of perspective, WCI they wanted to have it today, and I think they actually wanted it on July 21st. They would like to have it on the agenda, just for information. I'm in no hurry.
They're the ones who are in a hurry.
I'm not in a hurry.
Yeah, we're not.
I believe I heard a motion to table down here. Did I hear a
Yeah,
motion to table?
Yeah. Yes.
Do I have a second on motion to
Second.
table? Motion to table is a preferential motion and has to be voted on immediately. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you, Mr.
Even with my comment, recognize that I will do my review in a timely manner to get those comments back to WCI, but I think the district should not rush into it, I concur.
We'll do it expediently if they pay the 10
E, 2 proposals for anchor tree service for roadway tree maintenance.
Don't we need to get some bids?
Say again?
Don't we need to get some bids? Seems like we just have been giving, in other parts of the book, it indicates that we've spent $16,000+ recently with them. Maybe we need to start getting some bids.
April, can you help us with item D, E, please?
So the way that I understand it, when it comes to our tree service proposals, when we go out to seek proposals, this seems to be one of those areas that this particular contractor always comes in the lowest. And there's actually been, we've had other vendors actually tell us, don't ask us for proposals anymore. And so this is part of some of the things that I'm trying to figure out as a district. How do we establish partnerships with contractors to assure, I'm trying to figure out, does the board want us drilling down for each item and always going out for proposals? Because that creates a hardship on the relationships with these contractors. Anchor has been consistently here in Gateway. We do have an established relationship with them, and in this motion, we're asking for this initial trim to bring us into compliance along the roadways, and then on top of that, establish an ongoing relationship with this contractor to actually come in and do a quarterly review, because we are experiencing some liability issues with not keeping a vigilant check on the limbs of the oak trees along the roadway. So, I mean, we will do whatever the board directs us to do. I just want you to understand that these are some of the issues that we're struggling with at the staff level, is we're very small, so if we're always drilling down on proposals, that takes up administrative time, and it also burdens these contractors. And so we're trying to deal with things and figure out where do we need to establish relationships, and where can we, for the one-time service types of things, go out and get proposals and see how competitive we can get. But this is more of an ongoing process that I feel that we need to establish a relationship, and so we can call on somebody in a pinch when we need that, and they have consistently always been the lowest bidder. So I will do whatever you direct us to do.
Having a good relationship with them, considering the number of trees that we have to deal with, I think is more important than going out for bids every time you need to have a tree trim.
And there are different ways to maintain our competitiveness.
Sure.
Even, we don't have to break a relationship. We can still take that particular proposal, once a year and just vet it, every couple of years, vet it to make sure that we're still within the competitive range. But I do believe that this is a huge maintenance issue in this district, and I would like to establish a relationship.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve item E?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. May I have a
I'll
second?
second.
And have a second from Ms. Gill.
And just on a note on this, Anchor Tree Service just came into Stony Brook and trimmed all of our trees on our main boulevard, and they did an excellent job. We're
Okay.
very pleased with the work that they did.
That's good to know. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Is there a guy named Stephen in the audience? Would you please come to the podium and
Yes, sir.
tell us what you've done for us this time?
Okay, Stephen Bloom, Severn Trent. We included the next version of the budget in the package. This is really more for informational and discussion purposes. There's no action required. And we can keep including the budget and keep having discussions between now and when we adopt the budget in August. So we've included an updated version for you. The big news, or the big change in this piece, and if you look at it's page 138 is where my memo starts. We got the certified numbers in terms of the EAUs. So we have updated the budget to include the updated numbers. So for the general fund and for Lake Bank Restoration Fund, the EAUs actually went up compared to our prior version, or our preliminary budget. Same for Pelican Preserve. The EAUs went up there too. So for the general fund, and Lake Bank, it's up 119, and for Pelican Preserve, it's 224. So the impact of that is, we left the per EAU unit amount the same. That was approved by the board, and we just added the additional units. So at that point, it basically increases your revenue, and we offset that by putting the additional expenditures in the reserve account. So it just
How much
kind
is
of,
in the reserve now?
it's 200 for the general fund. It's 217, about 218,000. That's on page 144. So it just gives you more flexibility as you move forward and having a discussion about whether or not you want to keep the per EAU amount the same, or depending upon what you want to reduce. If you're comfortable, you could reduce some things either way. Again, it's about flexibility. The per EAU amount, which was established, was not changed. So that's kind of the key thing, and that's what will be noticed for the public hearing, is the same amount. So that's really kind of the big change in terms of what the effect of the numbers are. And kind of at the bottom of that top memo, I showed what the difference was. So for the general fund, that meant an additional 44,000 in revenue. For Pelican Preserve, it was about 187,000. So that was kind of the impact of making that change.
How about 50? Yes, Steve, Margaret has some information for you.
Okay.
With the earlier discussions of adding security details because of the fun park,
Yes.
and/or we may be trying to come up with some other security, I'd really like to see the contractual services under public safety. And it may not necessarily be the sheriff's office. I think we're gonna look at some other ideas to
Right.
to change that from 5 to 50.
Okay.
Everyone in agreement with that? Hearing none, everyone in
that's
agreement with that?
I feel that's adequate.
Okay.
Sure.
Speak now.
Wait a minute, we're having a
Well,
conversation.
I'm just curious because I just don't know if that amount is potentially adequate. I mean, in Stony Brook, we spend 90.
That's 7 days a week. So I don't know, and it's 8 hours.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we would actually go to that, so,
Okay. I was just.
I mean.
I don't know how much variance we have in our budget.
We have a lot.
And,
Yeah. There's a
I mean,
lot.
I was just.
Would
if
you
put up.
would you like to have 175 or 100?
I mean, 100 I think would probably be a good placeholder, and if you don't use it, you don't use it. But again, I'm new to your budgeting practices, so I don't know what your variance tolerance is, so.
Margaret, would you be opposed to 100?
No.
What about if you just added another line item that's miscellaneous, which gives you the flexibility to address cameras, to address whatever, but not just commit it all to sheriff's detail?
I think
I
that's
would-
kind of
I
what
wouldn't be
Margaret
opposed
was,
to that.
Sounds like a wonderful-
That
indicating.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
But
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I didn't necessarily mean that it had to be the sheriff's.
Right, yeah,
You're
I
just
was,
putting placeholder.
yeah, another public safety line item would work as well. I think it's really more the dollar amount. We can put the line in. So is it
It's
still
100
50?
now.
It's 100, okay.
It's 100 now.
50.
It's
100 total in that spot.
Yeah,
Okay,
100.
yeah, okay, good.
100.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So that 100 would
Well,
come out of
from
the,
5, I think 50 would,
When we start buying cameras.
it's up to you guys.
well, if you're purchasing cameras, depending upon what type of system, that's gonna come out of your capital program anyways. So that'd be a little bit different. So, and basically what you're pulling this 100,000 from is your capital program reserve. So you're kind of pulling them both there, at both ends.
In one pocket, not the other.
Again, we can make the change later. We can put the 100 in there now, and then as our discussions go on, we can adjust it once we have a better idea exactly what we're gonna do.
That's good.
Okay?
Yeah. Steve, as I went through this again, it appeared to me that you didn't make the changes on the Pelican Preserve that I thought we agreed to at the last meeting. And I would like for you to talk about page 163.
63. Yes, on the facilities maintenance specialist, I zeroed that out.
He did zero, you did.
Yeah, I zeroed that
That
out.
was zeroed out.
The only thing that I didn't do was on some of the smaller,
There was one small one, there was
Like-
a team
Right.
uniforms or team something.
Yeah.
eh,
And I must admit on that one, I thought team referred to athletic teams here,
No.
but I understand it did not.
Well, what about the 5607?
Team of staff, right?
Yes.
What-
Natural Resources Supervisor, Chapter Fund 02.
Well-
We didn't, no, we talked about the amount of the raise that we would be involved in, and that was because the facilities maintenance specialist was
Right.
allocated to us, and so it gave us a bigger chunk of the raise. But when you took that out, I think it's okay now.
yeah.
Okay, you look at 163, Phil, can you see that there?
Yeah.
You see down about a third of the way on the general fund, or on 002, there's a $5,607 charge for natural resources supervisor.
Yeah.
I thought we decided that was Elle and she wasn't gonna be
No,
doing it.
no, it was the facilities maintenance specialist.
It was the next
We
row.
had, we had been charged for the facilities maintenance specialist, and she was zeroed out.
Yeah, okay, but answer to the natural resources supervisor.
I must admit, I don't know, but I assume that, you know, there is a certain amount of work that the natural resources supervisor does for us. I'll have to express ignorance on that issue.
If all the waterways,
Hmm?
What's that?
it would be all of the waterways.
Well, I thought Elle
She does it.
Huh?
over here.
That's L.
That's Elle.
Oh, the natural resources supervisor?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I had it wrong.
Yeah.
It's the okay, then that's the one that should be zeroed out, not the, I thought she was the facilities maintenance specialist.
No.
Okay, my error then.
No, happens in the best of families, whatever.
Then that's the one we should zero out, Steve,
So-
yes.
Okay, so it's,
The natural resources supervisor 5607 should go to 0 under column 002.
Right.
okay.
And the facilities maintenance specialist should be reinstated, is that so?
I guess so.
And
Who is the facilities?
who is the
maintenance-
facilities
who is the
maintenance
facilities
specialist?
maintenance specialist? I don't
That's
even-
Anthony.
And he doesn't, no,
Does he do anything for Pelican Preserve?
no,
No, not that I'm
Nothing.
aware
Okay,
of.
so they should both be zeroed out.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, they're both.
Okay.
okay.
But I think,
That's good.
I mean, I think there is still a certain amount of obligation that we have as a district from a staff position for natural resources. Even if it's just an oversight component, she may, our natural resources supervisor may not be in there, doing daily inspections.
She's never there.
And-
Never.
And it's just like what I used to call an overhead distribution.
Mhm.
It's 10% is the way I'm getting it. And it all ought to just be changed
Okay.
to 0 and go back to 01.
Okay.
Speaking,
Does she
where
ever
is
go
the
over there and do
9.9%
any
thing?
inspections or any work over there?
We did on the lake bank walkthroughs.
On what, please?
The lake, when we did the lake walkthroughs.
Anthony did.
Yeah.
Anthony?
No, oh.
No.
But,
I was under.
yeah.
You gotta help me.
I mean, we don't, we handle our own ponds issues, our own waterways.
Totally.
And we don't need Elle to help us with it. We don't need her, we don't want her. And
That's a
I'm sure
little-
she's
that's a little
I'm sure
harsh,
she's a
Phil.
very nice lady, but we don't want her. We have volunteers who do all of that work. And
Correct.
we don't need the expense.
Okay, Steve, you got it?
I got it.
Anything else on the budget?
There was one other thing, and I can't find the page, and
Help me,
transcribing.
tell me what you're thinking about.
9.9% was the escalation of the contribution for Pelican Preserve. It
Oh,
went up-
yes, you're right. Went up from 7.9 to 9.9 or something.
Correct. Why?
Yeah, why?
Let me see if I can figure out what page.
Additional homes.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the allocation page. Let's see where that's at. That's page
Yeah, I can't find it, Steve.
154.
I'm going crazy here.
Yeah, and that is based on the EAU split. It's just a percentage. So as the EAUs will go up for Pelican Preserve, their percentage will as well.
There was another thing that I had, it was on page 143, and not to pick out a particular, but it was more information. 143, looking at Parks and Recreation. Payroll salaries, 42,801. Health and life insurance, 14,273. So is that our typical contribution, an additional 33 1/3% in addition to salaries for health and life insurance?
Do you know where he is? I love
He's
Yeah.
on
Page
143.
143.
Parks and Rec,
that. That's where I am, Gary, but I can't.
42,801, second column.
Oh, okay, 42,801.
Just looking at it. Is that the contribution? Is that what it costs?
It's about it's about 9,600 right now per person. Is the contribution for health, dental, and vision. So, and again, that's an allocation. So,
Yeah, it's getting huge. It's getting huge.
Okay, if you guys want to do that.
If you were a small business owner, you'd be probably thinking about closing up.
It's a treat,
It's
yes.
just getting awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but most people, as was brought up before, there is some employee contribution. It isn't all free. But that's up to you guys.
Okay, there's an adoption of a tentative budget. You need a resolution here?
yeah, the next agenda item is actually an amendment to your current budget.
Oh, that's right.
And it's
I'm sorry, I jumped in the wrong direction, I got it.
So are we at 5G, resolution?
Yes, 5G.
So there are several line items here that we're adjusting. Some of it is for the action actually today.
This is all
terms.
fiscal year 16.
This is fiscal year 16. What we try and do when we do these amendments in a perfect world is to balance taking away one, adding to one line, subtracting from another to keep it in balanced. The general fund we're unable to do that. So, I just want to make sure it's clear what we're doing here. We would actually be increasing the total expenditures for the fund by about $49,000. So it's a true amendment, not an adjustment. And I'll just give you some of the highlights here. Let's see, the big number is the lake maintenance. We're preparing for $39,000 to increase for the extra work that will need to be done before year end. And then the tree trimming, another $22,000 there, which again is part of the action that was done a couple minutes ago. So at this point in the budget process, we were unable to find enough line items to take it away. It doesn't mean that we will spend up to the entire budget for the year. It just means at this point in the fiscal year, we don't feel comfortable backing out anything else yet. But yeah, I did want to make that point, at least for the general fund, this is a true budget amendment, meaning it will be increasing the bottom line. But as you go through, when you look, for example, the capital project amendment is only, and that's adding the gator, capital project, and the enterprise fund is adding a gator as well. For the enterprise fund, it's a zero net gain there because we were able to find line items to zero it out. But again, the big one is the general fund.
What's the net addition to the general fund, Steve?
48,000, Bottom line.
950.
950.
Okay, you've heard the explanation and the needs for this. May I have a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Newbauer made a motion. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Margaret made the second. Any comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Financial report H.
So these financials are through May. And I can go through them in more detail. The part that I always kind of track the most is kind of with the water revenue. And it was good to see in several of the categories, water and sewer, the exception is irrigation, that we're actually over the year-to-date budget so far.
Give me
Which
a page number there, please.
that's on page 200. And again, I'm just kind of pointing out the most interesting part that I found in it. Because we talk about utility rates and we talk about how we're doing. Irrigation is a little bit behind, even though it is ahead of where we were last year at this time. But the other two are actually showing up ahead of the year-to-date budget, which is good to see. It's not a whole lot, but it is good to see. And then when you compare all three of those lines against where we were last year at the same time, you can see about $170,000 increase in revenue. So again, it's just one of the places that I like to track as I go through this. We just talked, how to do a budget amendment. So obviously, in a general fund, you have some places that have to be adjusted. But overall, the financials all look pretty good. Let's see, the other thing I like to tell you.
217, Steve.
217 is
Water meter replacement series, yada, yada, yada.
Mhm.
A lot of red ink.
Oh, the red is just how the funds have been used.
Any summary you could give us?
Well, the summary would be where you started, which is you started at 1.35. That was the original amount of the loan. So far, you've pulled a little bit over $1 million. So you have about $280,000 left to pull from this particular loan. And I believe there's an agenda item that discusses the meters coming up. So, there's money in here, to finish that out. Other than that, there really isn't anything of particular interest. The next page actually shows the individual drawdowns, which is everything that was approved to come pay Fort Line for the most part.
Okay. Any other questions on the financial statement? Thank you very much, Steve.
Okay.
Let's go to staff reports. Mr. Attorney, water meter replacement project?
Yes, we discussed at a prior board meeting, no longer having an issue of a conflict of interest with the four-line contract concerning the water meter replacement project. And we discussed either revising and then ultimately decided more appropriate to repeal the two prior resolutions as to the parties that could be involved, since we have April and also Chris now involved, working with Tyler Wainwright of Tetra Tech. So the recommended action is, based upon the memorandum, there's no conflict, no violation, or no conflicts under Chapter 112 Florida statute with regards to the district manager's employees being involved in the four-line contract at the present time. So we request it's appropriate, and in order for the board to adopt the resolution, it's we don't have a number for it yet. It's 2016-XX, whatever Cale's office assigns to it, to repeal resolutions 2015-04 and 2016-01.
All right.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second to approve the resolution that starts on page 226. Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0.
The next item is the assignment of the Stony Brook security contract. The vendor has signed it, indicating his acceptance of it. And you saw the underlying language was added to the prior version, and strike. And with regards to the need for the background checks, that was after the last board meeting, so that's good order. Request board authorization for the chairman to execute the assignment of contract.
So moved.
I have a second?
Second.
Motion second, conversation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0.
I have nothing further.
Thank
On
you.
that, thank you, Mr.
I'm sorry?
Thank you.
Sorry?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Engineer, I don't see you. How about the manager?
I have nothing. The item was handled internally.
Thank you very much. And the operations manager has already introduced the staff. So supervisor comments, Gary?
No.
Pam?
None?
Margaret?
I just had a question. I had seen some work being done in the FPL easement. Is that by any chance the gas line going in? No.
No.
Okay, just, that was wishful thinking. So we don't know where the natural gas is.
We're still in the review process. I believe Tyler will wrap up his review and give it back to the TICO engineers as soon as he gets back.
Okay, thank you.
Doug? you-
Yeah, I just have an awareness item, and I hate that Ed left, but there was a little bit of due diligence done around investigating some additional property, one being the Girl Scout building. So April and I are going to work on drafting a memo with some details on whether that option might be viable. So we had our engineers in April, and Bill was engaged on some previous research. So Bill asked that we put an informational packet together for the board so we can figure out what our next steps might be. So just want to bring that attention.
Thank you very much. Are we all done? Anyone? Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your hard work tonight. Good to get along without you.